Daniel Levy is a Middle East analyst who was a former negotiator for Israel during the Oslo process. 6 weeks into the war, I spoke to him. That was earlier today. And I began by asking him what he thought was the significance of Israel targeting Iranian petrochemical plants.
What we've seen throughout this is that quite often Israel would dictate the pace of ascending up the escalatory ladder. And so Iran would respond in kind. It threatened to do so. It has done so on several occasions. And that would further burn even the prospect of any off-ramps. And one could probably with significant justification, see the attack on the petrochemical facilities in Iran in that light. Obviously, most crucially, when this war started, but also as it's gone along, Iranian gas fields, Iranian oil depots early on. And now we're at this juncture where the American president has said, this is, I'm giving you the non-expletive laden version. This is what we're going to do next. And Israel may be preemptively trying to make sure that is what, in fact, happens. I think Netanyahu sees this in many respects as the longer he can keep America in destroying stuff, the more he advances Israel's goal in this war. And given that anyone, even a trained psychologist, would struggle to understand what the US strategy is and what the US is up to. In key respects, it's Israel driving this war. And Finan O'Toole had a piece really early on, and he said, America doesn't have a story or a narrative. The narrative of this war is Benjamin Netanyahu's. And in key respects, there's a sense in which this is a proxy war where America is the proxy. And without suggesting there is no American agency, because I don't think that's the case, there is Israeli strategy and there is not American strategy. And that's the context in which one should see this.
Just to be explicit about what you imagine sort of Israel's plan to be in terms of this particular attack on this petrochemical plant. So Donald Trump has set this deadline. He said, if you don't open the strait by 8 p.m. on Tuesday, I'll attack all your power plants. Many people expect that Donald Trump wants to walk this back. What the Israelis are doing is preemptively attacking civilian infrastructure in Iran to try and coax them, I presume, into a retaliatory attack against the Gulf states allied with America. And so then Donald Trump can say, oh, well, now the Iranians are bombing all this energy infrastructure in the Gulf. We actually do have to go and bomb all of theirs. So it's sort of, is Israel trying to coax Iran into an action which will then provoke an American counter-reaction?
So I want to go one level deeper maybe in that, because yes, a lot of this is Israel setting a tone, Iran doing what it has said. So, when a water desal plant is hit in one place in Iran, Iran will respond in a Gulf state, linking or not linking that to a particular American-related target. When the metal factory in Iran was hit, and Iran has said, and quite often it's been able to follow up on what it's been saying, that if you do X, we will do the equivalent of X, and it has been able to do so. So if Iran does that, and this is therefore prolonged, you are further along the path of what Israel wants, which is maximum destruction, maximum state collapse, chaos, anarchy in Iran, if it can achieve that. And if not, well, at least more has been destroyed. So let's get as many hits in. In fact, in the Israeli media, they're saying that the first set of target bank of intended targets inside Iran has been exhausted. So this is explicitly now about state infrastructure degradation. And America is, of course, with the media comments, interviews, Truth Social postings of Trump being explicit about what it intends to do next. So I'm not so sure that Israel has burned the off-ramp, but it is trying to, and it is continuing down this path. Trump, to the extent to which one can attempt to read what he is up to, it seems with a certain degree of desperation is kind of making these threats and hoping someone will deliver something that he can call a win, the end mission accomplished image. Now, first of all, that's relatively easy on the one hand for him to do because the relationship with reality is so non-existent in the information bubble in which he exists and which he perpetuates, that he can make that claim at any time. But why would the Iranians accept something short of a credible end to a war that they did not launch, and to get out of this in an improved position when America has failed and Israel has failed to win this, so to speak, in their terms? So that's kind of where we are stuck. And let's just be clear, alongside Israel's consistent effort, its push, its determination to keep this going and to escalate, you also have those voices in Trump's little information bubble. We have serious questions, of course, as to what information he is being fed, but whether it's traditionally hawkish Republican political operatives, Republican electeds like Lindsey Graham, he's living his Barbie days, he's living his best day every day. The neoconservative hawks who have pushed this all along, John Bolton, who one moment is being gone after by the Trump administration, by the DOJ, but he's, again, very happy. This is what he's wanted all along, and he's pushing them further. So there is an ecosystem on the American side that has been there for a long time, that's been waiting for this moment, and that is working very tightly with Israel's leadership to push this further as well.
I mean, at the start of the war, we learned that Lindsey Graham had been coaching Netanyahu into how to persuade Donald Trump. So I imagine that kind of thing is still going on. How hard is Israel getting hit? Because, I mean, obviously the Gulf states seem desperate. Well, actually, it's ambiguous. There's reporting that the Saudis wanted to continue, but some of the Gulf states seem desperate for this to stop because their infrastructure is getting attacked. Is Israel, obviously there are some buildings that have been hit. I think 4 people died yesterday in Haifa, but it doesn't seem like the country is experiencing the same kind of damage that the Gulf states are. I mean, is that the interpretation you have as well?
So you have different positions, just to briefly touch on that, in the Gulf states. Some are very clearly, explicitly, Oman in the lead there, leaning into de-escalate and negotiate. Qatar is a little more also in that direction. Some being quite open in terms of go further, so-called get the job done. UAE is more in that position. Very contradictory reporting regarding the Saudi position during this. When it comes to Israel, there is an exhaustion. I don't want to make light of what that is like. I also don't want to pretend that that is similar to what people in Gaza or Lebanon are going through. But for Israelis to be running to bomb shelters several times a day, to protected rooms, many areas of Israel, especially those inhabited by a Palestinian Arab minority, let alone those under Israeli occupation, you don't have those. So this is not the enthusiasm for the war because of the way it impacts the home front that you had during Gaza amongst the Israeli Jewish public, but there is support for the war. So the question then becomes, if there's not the public pressure to wind this down, what are the other ways in which Israel is being affected? And the one that has emerged most in the last days and perhaps even last couple of weeks is this debate of what are really the goals? Can they be achieved? Who's to blame for underestimating the other side and setting the apparent goals of this war in a place that it doesn't seem that they can be matched. You had the IDF chief of staff come out and say, we're going to collapse in on ourselves if we continue to impose such a heavy burden on our reservists, on our military. There he was, of course, not only and perhaps not principally referring to what's going on with Iran, but he was talking about the massive call-up of reservists on the Lebanon front and, of course, the continued actions in Gaza. So the cumulative sense of this, and let's, by the way, not forget, every day Palestinians being killed in Gaza, massive Israeli military operations in the West Bank. But it's the cumulative sense of a war on several fronts, none of which has been decisively delivered in terms of its outcome. Hamas still standing, Hezbollah showing a capacity to respond to Israel, a capacity to offer resistance on the ground, real questions as to how deep into Lebanese territory Israel will go, and Iran able to send missiles on a daily basis. You put all of that together, and I don't want to suggest Israel is on its knees and gasping, but this is not the outcome. Despite, I think most people would say the Israeli Air Force, for instance, in its terms has performed super effectively. But this is not the outcome they would have hoped to achieve. And that word quagmire is beginning to emerge, especially in discussions on what's happening on the Lebanon front. So if you put all that mix together, you're not seeing Netanyahu improving his political position in the polls. You're seeing those questions being asked, but you do still have an overwhelming, if not exclusive, reliance on military outcomes and an Israel which still has nothing to say and nothing to put forward in terms of any kind of realistic political, diplomatic way forward in the region. And of course, in Israel, where in the Zionist dominant political camp, at least there's no real opposition or anyone saying, here's a different way forward, which doesn't primarily rely on our military.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, it's the first time I heard that it isn't really going to Israel's plan and that they are sort of also struggling. The analysis I've been hearing so far is that sort of Netanyahu is the only one benefiting from this. Everyone else is completely screwed. But you're saying that, it's not quite that simple.
No. Look, there's not a single poll which is showing that Netanyahu, if one takes political outcomes as mattering for him, there's not a single poll which is showing him having advanced massively, because Israelis are looking round and saying, wait a minute, week 6, and we're still every day going to the bomb shelters? You told us in June that Iran's capacity had been decimated. Hezbollah, massive capacity to silence Israel's north in terms of the ability to go about any kind of normal daily life. Troops advancing very slowly and precariously in South Lebanon. You had told us Hezbollah was a spent force. So again, Israel's destructive capacity should not be taken lightly, and it clearly has that. But this is not the, I don't want to say cakewalk. It's not the cakewalk, clearly. But Israelis didn't entirely expect that. But they did, I think, especially when you do this together with the Americans, I think they did expect things to be looking a lot more definitive, a lot more overwhelmingly in their favor than an Iran that is still saying, no, we are going. Not to capitulate, not to accept your diktat. We are going to be part, and perhaps a significant or the more significant part, of dictating the terms if this ends. We are effectively pursuing a strategy through our mosaic setup. That strategy effectively deploys asymmetric warfare. Hezbollah can still hit back at you significantly if you hit. This isn't going well for you.